Sunset Studying Professor, and I'm going to do another podcast. And again, I'm going to do one with my brother. And as you can see, he's got lots of hair and I don't, and I have not a single musical note in my body. And Chris, as you can see, is a mad keen guitarist and has got another album out. But apart from that, apart from also being a doctor as well, he also runs his own creative agency. And one of the projects that Chris and I have been working on together is writing a book called Flip. So, Chris, can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by flip thinking?
Well, Flip is, it started off originally as a creative book, but then, having worked in the creative industries for so long, as has Paul, but we really sort of decided that it was taking some of that thinking into where we'd gone. We'd moved progressively from the marketing and advertising industry more and more into business consultancy. When we started Creative Orchestra after leaving Saatchi's, initially we were doing a lot of work with creativity across advertising, PR, social, you name it, and digital. But then we found more and more clients were coming to us with problems that weren't solved by advertising, and we got more and more into business consultancy, which takes up probably almost 50% of what we do. What we found was that the way we're being trained to think was actually really quite refreshing to a lot of clients, whereas management consultants are very linear thinkers, and they tend to see things in a different way. We were much more about joining the dots in fresh ways and looking at things back to front and turning things inside out. And that culture of challenge, which advertising cultivates very well, was not one that was very prevalent in the world of management consultancy. So we very early on, many years ago, over 10 years ago, we formed The Garage, which came out of a sort of an incubation idea of actually based on Steve Jobs and Apple, starting simple, stripping things back. And we started working with clients, and we found that our most successful form, and it was taking things and saying, well, let's look at it the other way around. And by flipping things, it became a very powerful way of shaking up the conventional thinking. It's turning things around. And that has been a very, very successful philosophy across creating ideas. It's been a successful philosophy in challenging to make people think. Because even when you have interesting ideas, you've got to make sure that the culture and the people you're talking to are going to buy it. And getting them to see things in other ways is very important, because you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And the same is true of many people in business. So Flip really was born out of, taking thinking that we developed in one area and putting it into another area, and then seeing how those methodologies work very well in helping understand business. We've helped a lot of businesses make a lot of money that way.
Can you give me a few examples, either things you've done yourself or things that you see out in the marketplace that people would recognize too, to try to bring alive what you mean when you say flipping a piece of thinking?
Well, I mean, we were working with a well-known shaving brand who had a female offspring product, which is worth a lot of money, almost potentially more than the male brand. Yet it was packaged from the male brand. And that was King of Shaves. And King of Shaves' female product couldn't have been less attractive to women. It was designed by men. It was called King of Shaves for women. And it had cliches of pink packaging and flowers. And they had all blokes work on it. So the first thing we did is we flipped it and put an entire female team on it. And we looked at reframing. We did a lot of reframing. So we said, at the moment you sell this functionality, what if we can flip it and turn it into something more fun? So literally took the functionality to fun. We looked at how shaving products and other products that women use were used in the bathroom, for example. We noticed that there was a very distinct parallel. Often things work in polar apart. So something might be over here. And what we do is reframing, we flip it over to there. And what we found with shaving products for women, they were largely kept in the cupboard under the sink, and they were used at the early part of the evening and seen as very functional. But they're all part of that beautification of going out and having a good time, most of which, I should add, was actually beautification for the benefit of other women, not for the benefit of men. And so we took the product, we pushed it up and repositioned it from functionality to fun, to associate it with the night out. We tested that, did it with lots of groups, lots of ladies, and it scored and scored. We finally whittled down 20 original concepts down to 5, then down to 1, and launched the product. When the product was launched, and I was the only male person involved, and I did most of the strategy, but the girls did a lot of the design and checking things were right. That product just sold off the shelf. Before then, it was about to be delisted. It sold off the shelf. So much so, they cancelled all the advertising because they didn't need it. In fact, supply was not good enough to meet demand, and they had to get a second supplier. So when you challenge conventional thinking, you challenge the way that the brand has thought, because at the time they just wanted us to tweak it. We said, no, we've got to throw it completely away. So that was a radical rethink for them. So often what we're doing with Flip is we're almost going to the opposite extreme. And there's a thing called elastication of thinking, which is if I take you here then you'll tend to bounce back here. If I take you twice as far, you'll bounce back a bit further than before. If you really stretch people to the final extreme, they either bounce back to a lot further away from where they were originally, or they completely flip their thinking. You know, so that's kind of the sort of deeper psychology of it. Is we're trying to get people to break away from that boxed in linear thinking. I don't really want to use the term thinking outside the box, but it's about getting people to look at the other way around.
So are there any, you know, how do you do this? I can hear people say, yeah, flip thinking sounds really good. And, you know, flipping things like dirt is good. And, you know, all those other great classic campaigns that have done sort of similar things where they've made, you know, good be bad or bad be good. You know, the Guinness campaign about making a virtue slow, you know, are all quite nice examples of it. But how do you do it? You know, what do you do? Do you like almost like identify the sacred cows? Do you sort of like have a list of questions, or do you just like spend time doing almost ethnographic, looking at people doing it? What do you do to help you have an ability to flip things?
Well, firstly, just going back to what you said about campaigns, the one campaign that influenced me most was Volkswagen in the 60s, because I thought it was amazing, this campaign that took a car and said, it's ugly. You couldn't be more opposite to what the market was trading. This is a car that's small and slow, but it gets you there, opposite of what the market was after. And I remember reading a book of psychology. It was written in the very late 50s in marketing psychology, before actually The Hidden Persuaders came out. It was very influential, this idea of actually almost looking at things in the opposite. What would do if you looked at it the opposite way around? And I think that from very early ages in advertising stuck with me as something that was very powerful. The methodology we use is, firstly, you have to establish where you are. You can't flip unless you know where you are. And that where you are is not just about somebody producing a report. It's about understanding where the mindset of the client is. So, for example, when we were doing MPD, developing a product for food to go, which is a drink, we realized that the biggest challenge here was not inventing the product. It was actually changing the client's attitude and mindset towards launching a new product. And we had to get them to rethink. So one of the things we said to them is, you cannot actually think the way we need you to think in this environment. We need to change the environment. So what you need to do is to find an office somewhere on this business estate and do it up in a completely different way. And we'll have all our meetings in there and we'll do our thinking in there, because we need you to change your mindset. You need to turn it the other way around. At the moment, you are in an environment that is all about pure logistics and linear thinking and risk averse. We want you to go in an environment that is about taking risks. It's about non-linear. It's about thinking in a different way. And it's about being, you know, think of it as like a Google lounge. And that was very successful because we realized we could not sell good forward thinking if we couldn't actually get them to think in the right frame of mind. So that's one of our methodologies, is to get the client's culture and mindset to change. Often when you look at things, you need to map things out. So it's not just a case of saying, oh, let's do the opposite, because sometimes that's just stupid. It's about looking at the dynamics, and it isn't a case of just going left to right polar. We will often look at mapping in a way that takes it maybe in 6 or 7 different ways, and then look at how we might take it to a different way. It isn't just about flipping for the sake of it. The flipping is about actually opening the mind and looking at new opportunities. And there's kind of thing we used to do, we did with Sky actually, to get them to think differently, was called the roundabout theory. And it's going back many years. It was bounding around for a short while. And it was about the fact that in non-East European culture, we tend to work in linear ways. We carry on in a straight line until somebody makes us go left or right. But in more Asian cultures, you'd stop at the roundabout and you'd go, before I go forward, I have to consider left or right, or even going backwards. And that methodology I found was very useful in getting clients to stop and think and say to themselves, should we carry on this direction or should we go in the opposite direction? And sometimes, one client recently, we said, you need to go back 2 steps before you can go back before you can go forward, because where you are now, you cannot move forward. You have to go back, and therefore that will take you down a different path.
Brilliant. I think let's conclude there for time. Just to really say to everyone else that we do run workshops on the flip thinking. So if you want any more details, then just contact me at the end of this video at the end.
I think I should add one thing. I think where flip comes in is, if you've been down that route where you've had all the conventional thinking, you had the management consultants in, and we worked a lot after management consultants, and now we work with quite a few management consultants. You've been there and you're not getting the surprisingly different thinking, then that's where we come in best. We come in afterwards for the more challenging briefs and say, okay, you've had all the predictability. And I use this in a way, I haven't got one at hand at the moment, but I often show a dice. If you look at a dice, there are 6 sides, but you often only get to see 3. And most of the time, a lot of consultants will come in and show you the obvious three. What we do is we show you the three that you know that are there, but you can't see yet.
Brilliant. Great thinking. Chris, we'll be in touch. Okay. Ciao.
All right.
Okay. Bye.